and 31 great-grandchildren. He was a pillar in the Yemeni community, and while his loss will stay with us forever, his life and legacy will never be forgotten. I met Hamoud's family a couple of days ago at a vigil in his memory hosted by the Queensborough president. The family will be joining us at our stated meeting today. But this weekend's shootings are a reminder of the work we must continue to do as a city to make our communities safer. There is nothing like standing with a grieving family whose heart is heavy because of senseless gun violence. We have to continue to make necessary investments, as well as pursuing federal legislation in partnership with our colleagues in Washington to codify laws to stop the proliferation of illegal weapons coming into our communities. Now I'd like to discuss the City FEP's voucher bills that this council enacted to tackle the record high homelessness and eviction crisis. I want to be clear. These bills are about helping the lowest income New Yorkers facing homelessness and housing insecurity. They have always been about these New Yorkers, and it's been disconcerting to see it misconstrued that somehow these bills would open the program to people in our city who are not in the greatest need. No one wants to live in poverty and experience the challenges it creates. This package of bills is focused on ensuring the city does all it can to help these New Yorkers access housing security to avoid homelessness. These bills are the most significant policy reforms to address homelessness within our city in years. The fact that we are responsible for advancing solutions of this significance is something to be very proud of. There are over 50,000 long-term New Yorkers in our shelter system, creating record levels. These bills are aimed at removing barriers to access vouchers as a pathway out of the system for them. We know that other barriers remain and must be a focus of our collective efforts to address, whether it's source of income discrimination or building and preserving more housing. This council has been committed to advancing these efforts together with the administration. And even in the face of challenges, we must continue that pursuit. New York City is also in the midst of an intense eviction crisis that risks pushing more New Yorkers into homelessness. Over the last 18 months, since the state eviction moratorium expired, there have been over 178,000 eviction notices filed in the city of New York. These bills are also aimed at removing barriers faced by the lowest income of these New Yorkers to accessing vouchers that can help them avoid losing their homes and becoming unhoused. The claim that using vouchers to prevent evictions would create more competition for voucher holders in shelters is incorrect. Every New Yorker at the lowest income levels that we can help avoid eviction through the use of City FEP's vouchers is another crisis averted and another person we've prevented from entering into the shelter system in the first place. In fact, this proactive approach stops forcing people into shelters by making them eligible for vouchers and relieves the added competition for those seeking housing with vouchers in a limited housing supply. Now let's talk about the costs. Too often, the government fails to account for the comprehensive costs that result from harmful outcomes to its constituents, and homelessness is no different. The impacts of slipping into homelessness for a family or individual are immense. They are not only borne by those directly affected, but entire communities and our whole city. There are the shelter costs, which are immense. Housing a family of two in an emergency hotel shelter for 1 year costs more than housing that same family in a 2-bedroom apartment using a City FEP's voucher for 5 years. Yet, there are also the educational, health, justice system, and other costs that are created when people become and remain homeless. The city's largest homeless shelter provider, WIN, hi Christine, conducted an analysis of the bills that accounted for these comprehensive costs, building on the work of Community Service Society. It found that the bills and their upfront investment in vouchers would be more than offset by the savings from the averted costs of homelessness, saving the city over $730 million each year. During a time of record homelessness, it is critical that we respond with the urgency and strength needed to address the scale of this crisis. We know there are many challenges that contribute to our record homelessness, and solving them will require many solutions that we must collectively advance. The thousands of vacant supportive housing and NYCHA units must be a priority for us to utilize. We also have to ensure adequate support and staffing for the agencies responsible for confronting these challenges, whether through housing, homeless services, eviction prevention, voucher discrimination enforcement, or other human services. The housing crisis and shortage of housing is one of the biggest challenges that the mayor and I have both acknowledged and worked collaboratively to address. We must continue those collective efforts because until we have enough housing in our city, we will continue to face immense housing pressures that feed these problems. This includes all types of housing, including truly affordable housing and supportive housing that has languished from a lack of investments. These bills passed with a veto-proof majority because this council recognizes the scale of challenges contributing to homelessness. We're willing to do whatever it takes to keep New Yorkers in their homes and avoid evictions and more quickly transition from shelters. I'm proud of this council for its commitment to advancing these solutions today, and we will need to do far more to address the housing crisis. My hope is that after today, we can put aside our differences with the administration on the issue to advance the countless issues related to it that demand our attention and our collaboration. New Yorkers need us to do this, and our city needs us to do this. Now let's move on to our stated agenda. First, we'll vote on the following land use items. 1656 West 10th Street rezoning will facilitate a new 6-story residential building with ground floor community facility space. It will include 24 housing units, approximately 6 affordable units under MIH Option 1, and 10 accessory off-street parking spaces in Councilmember Yeager's district. We're also voting on 2 applications in Councilmember Palladino's district, 189-10 Northern Boulevard Commercial Overlay. As a result of the applicant having withdrawn the application, this council will be voting to file this land use item to remove it from our calendar. 43rd Avenue demapping, an application for demapping and disposing of a portion of 43rd Avenue with an existing encroachment. The council will be voting on a resolution to disapprove this application. Lastly, we will vote on the following pieces of legislation. First, Introduction 853A, sponsored by Councilmember Joanne Ariola, requires the Department of Transportation to install mile markers along designated sections of Cross Bay Boulevard, Beach Channel Drive, and Rockaway Point Boulevard, all of which are major arteries around the Rockaways. New signage will help motorists who are stranded or experience car issues and need to communicate their location to support services. Councilmember Ariola was unable to join us here today, but we do thank her for her work on this legislation. Next, Introduction 645B, sponsored by myself, will strengthen the pathway to civil service justice for justice-involved New Yorkers by requiring the Department of Citywide Administrative Services to administer civil service exams in the city's forthcoming borough-based jails. This bill would authorize DCAS to waive the civil service exam fee for justice-involved individuals and require the city to provide information and support to justice-involved New Yorkers who wish to learn more about the exam process. It is critical that we continue to expand equitable access to opportunities for all New Yorkers to enter into our city's workforce. This is a bill that I first introduced in my State of the City last year, and I'm proud that the council is passing it today. Introduction 1074A, sponsored by Councilmember Crystal Hudson, would prohibit the use of city resources to detain any person for seeking, obtaining, providing, or facilitating gender-affirming care in New York or outside New York in circumstances where it would have been lawful had it happened in our state. This bill would also prohibit the use of city resources to cooperate with an investigation of a person on grounds that such person is known or believed to have sought, obtained, provided, or facilitated gender-affirming care outside of New York when their conduct would have been lawful had it occurred here. Councilmember Hudson is unable to join us here today, but we thank her for her advocacy and work on this legislation. Introduction 887B, sponsored by Public Advocate Jumaane Williams, would require the Department of Correction to report quarterly about the housing placements of transgender, gender nonconforming, non-binary, or intersex individuals within DOC's custody. Public Advocate Williams could not join us this afternoon, but we thank him for his work on this legislation. Next, we will vote on two bills that aim to reduce New Yorkers' exposure to lead and increase enforcement of existing lead laws. Lead-based paint remains a public health hazard, especially for children. This package we're voting on today will strengthen implementation of lead prevention and reduction efforts as we continue to take critical actions to ensure that families are safe and healthy. Introduction 200A, sponsored by Councilmember Rafael Salamanca, would require the Department of Health and Mental Hygiene to submit a semi-annual publicly available report on the number of objections filed by multiple dwelling owners to DOHMH lead abatement orders. The report would be required to specify the reasons why any objections are found to have merit, including faulty testing or paint sampling, or an exemption based on the dwelling's construction date. I invite Councilmember Salamanca to come forward and speak about his bill.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Good afternoon. I want to thank for the support on passing Intro 200A, my bill that will ensure that all lead abatement order appeals are thoroughly or pink sampling, or an exemption based on the dwelling's construction date. While we have seen this practice of skirting orders conducted in housing units across the city, it is especially concerning that NYCHA was known for doing widespread appeals of their lead abatement orders on public housing units. Can expand upon this, but this is just a reminder that it was reports of NYCHA's using this technique to avoid having to actually do the work of addressing the issue that led to this bill. Lead in paint has proven over and over again to cause serious adverse health effects. So it is reasonable that corners are still being. It is unreasonable that corners are still being cut to allow its presence in New York City housing units. It has been reported that more than 1,100 children have tested positive for lead in New York City public housing since 2012. With this new law, we have ensured our residents, especially those most vulnerable, will be protected from the harmful consequences of lead poisoning. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Council Member. Introduction 193A, sponsored by Councilmember Carlina Rivera, would categorize lead-based paint that is peeling or on a deteriorated subsurface in the common areas of a residential building as an immediately hazardous violation. The bill also strengthens inspection requirements for common areas when there are children living in the building. I invite Councilmember Rivera to come forward and speak about her legislation.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Okay, it's hot. So, I just want to thank you, Madam Speaker, for your leadership. I want to thank all of the advocates who helped work on this bill. I'm Councilmember Carlina Rivera. I represent District 2, which is the east side. And my district has really faced their fair share of issues with lead dust, whether it's and lead paint, whether it's because many of the families there are living in very, very old tenements, to even tactics used by landlords using construction as harassment or ongoing renovations in some of these buildings. So these issues are coming up all the time, and I want to thank Speaker Adams for her leadership, but also for inviting me to join you today to discuss a bill I'm very proud to be passing. As was mentioned, Intro 193 will create an immediately hazardous violation for the existence of lead-based paint in any common area of a multiple dwelling where a child under the age of 6 resides if such paint is peeling or is on a deteriorated subsurface. Inspectors will be expected to survey common areas as they report for a lead-related inspection of a dwelling where there is a young child. So New York City has some of the strongest laws and programs designed to address the ongoing crisis of lead exposure, but without adequate enforcement and comprehensive regulations, these laws are essentially rendered meaningless to families who are confronting health issues. You know, in 2004, this council passed the New York City Childhood Lead Poisoning Prevention Act, and it was found that HPD had actually not issued any violations for the first 12 years. So it's really important that we're implementing this the right way. So despite decades of significant advances in the fact that childhood lead poisoning is completely preventable, too many children are still exposed to lead and progress has plateaued. Building common areas allow neighbors to gather and interact, promoting community support systems and a sense of belonging. And by addressing lead exposure risk in common areas, we move one step closer to a lead-free NYC. It is well documented that lead can cause long-term, irreversible negative health impacts and can reduce a child's learning capacity and academic achievement. And we heard those stories from families that came into City Hall chambers to testify, heartbreaking stories. In 2021, it was reported that over 2,500 New York City children under 6 years of age were identified with dangerous blood lead levels, and 81% of children under 6 identified with dangerously high blood levels are Asian, Black, or Latino. 88% of children with elevated blood lead levels reside in moderate to high poverty neighborhoods. And in March 2023, 45% of all lead-related court cases in New York City were in the Bronx. So this is happening in disproportionately low-income neighborhoods where people are living in poverty, predominantly communities of color. So this legislation builds on decades of progress. We know there's more work to be done. I look forward to working with colleagues, advocates, neighbors, and everyone who has really put forward this legislation, of course, committee staff and my own team. We must do everything we can to protect New York's children from the harmful impacts of lead exposure and strive for nothing less than a lead-free NYC. And I'm looking forward to passing more legislation to ensure that we're doing the right thing by families. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Councilmember Rivera. Next, we will vote on some of the legislative actions that are part of the Council's mental health roadmap, envisioned by Mental Health Committee Chair Linda Lee. Chair Lee, Majority Leader Keith Powers, Councilmember Bottcher, and I released this roadmap with advocates last year to improve mental health outcomes in our city. It focuses on addressing existing challenges in the city's mental health care landscape and strengthening the infrastructure and investments in evidence-based solutions at the community level. Last month, we passed several of the legislative items from the roadmap, and today, we're voting on the rest of the proposals in the roadmap. We look forward to continuing this work in partnership with service providers, advocates, community members, and all stakeholders. I especially want to thank Chair Lee for her leadership in moving this roadmap forward. Introduction 1021A, sponsored by Majority Leader Keith Powers, would require the mayor to establish at least 4 new crisis respite centers in the cities to provide individuals with mental illness with better access to community-based, peer-run facilities that are alternatives to emergency hospitalization. I now invite Majority Leader Powers to come forward and speak about his bill.
Good afternoon. Nice to see everyone here today, and thank you to the Speaker for bringing this bill to a vote today. I'm City Council Member Keith Powers, and very proud to be here to continue the work we've been doing around mental health in the City Council. I want to thank Chair Linda Lee for her leadership in this plan, and of course the Speaker Adams, who's prioritized and has been instrumental in making sure the City Council focuses on mental health. I'm really excited to say that today we're passing a final portion of that package. The series of bills passed will enhance the way we analyze and deliver mental health care to our neighbors in crisis. Among those is the bill we're passing today, Intro 1021, which I'm proud to sponsor and will require the opening of additional crisis respite centers in New York City. They are peer-based model of care that provides residents with a place to find flexible, temporary support structure to work through their mental health crisis or to prevent it from reaching a more acute level. the folks that are in these facilities can continue in their daily lives, continue on their daily work and family activities outside the facility, minimizing the disruptions caused by other interventions. And that's really important. They get to go on with their lives while also receiving the support that they need. These provide a critical alternative to hospitalization, especially as we see hospital facilities slashing psychiatric beds capacity in recent decades, recent years. And on a recent visit to one center near my house in Councilmember Rivera's district, I heard directly from providers and residents about how effective and important option they are for care that city can provide to them. 4 of those centers are already created with city funding, and today we're going to double that number and add 4 more. I want to thank all the folks of the council who worked and negotiated hard to get to this moment, as well as the advocates and providers that helped us work on this bill. I want to give a particularly thanks to my team, to Haley, to Pedro, and of course to Sarah, and all the other folks who helped work on this bill here. This is going to make sure that we have another layer of help for people before they reach a really acute mental health need, but while they're going through something and need help and support while they go on their daily lives. And the center that I saw just blocks from my house, and by the way, I walked past it a million times and didn't even know what it was or that it was there, and then found out that it was providing such critical care to New Yorkers. It is going to help save people's lives and help save them at a very critical moment, so I'm very proud we're expanding that. I want to congratulate my colleagues for their bills as well, and thank the Speaker for her leadership, and I, of course, want to end on a personal note, which I want to wish my Communications Director, Isaac, who's standing right here, a very happy birthday, because it is his birthday here today. So happy birthday to Isaac. Thank you to everyone for helping get this bill passed today.
Thank you so much. Happy birthday, Isaac. Thank you, Majority Leader. Introduction 1022A, sponsored by Councilmember Kevin Riley, would require the mayor to establish at least 5 new clubhouses for individuals with serious mental illness. The clubhouse model emphasizes community and provides wraparound services and opportunities for social connection, including group activities, peer support, job readiness skills, and transitional employment opportunities. And Councilmember Kevin Riley is going to tell us what that legislation is all about.
Best shoes in the city.
Well, you know it. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm happy to give remarks today strengthening New York City's Council's commitment to addressing our city's mental health crisis by expanding resources and support to uplift New Yorkers coping with serious mental health illnesses. The New York City Council recognizes how adequate funding, supportive services, and interagency connection strengthens the connection of both medical and mental health and rehabilitation. The passing of this legislative package is a step in the right direction to reshaping the way our city views and prioritizes mental health as a critical part of total wellness, thus preventing challenges and tragedies that stem from the lack of health care and programming. As an advocate for mental wellness, I am proud to prime sponsor legislation Intro 1022 in relation to establishing 5 more clubhouses for individuals with serious mental illnesses. Intro 1022A, will establish clubhouses that mandate the establishment for safe, new age support centers and secure true means of addressing the public health issue. This includes expanding services to address a range of disorders, providing wraparound services that include medical and mental care, as well as employment and educational opportunities and peer support, and reporting every 6 months that encourages true and effective change. As a city, we must protect vulnerable New Yorkers and create a sustainable plan that helps them receive the support they need and be a resource for others experiencing similar challenges. I would like to thank Speaker Adams, my colleagues, Chair Lee, and those who co-sponsored, and the advocates for supporting this intro, and I'm looking forward to getting this passed today. Thank you.
To get my shades out, those shoes are a little, it's good, it's good. And lastly, we're voting on 2 bills sponsored by the architect of the Mental Health Roadmap, Mental Health, Disabilities, and Addiction Committee Chair Linda Lee. Introduction 1018A would require the Office of Community Mental Health, in conjunction with the New York Police Department, New York City Fire Department, and other relevant agencies to provide a publicly accessible annual report to the Council on the Mayor's involuntary removals and transport directive. Information shall include the number of and legal basis for the removals conducted, the number of 911 calls that resulted in removals, information on the locations of removals and where individuals are transported, and demographic information of those removed and transported. Introduction 1019A would require OCMH to maintain access to an interactive map of the locations, contact information, and payment information, including insurance accepted, of mental health service providers. And I now invite Chair Lee up to the podium to deliver her remarks.
Thank you so much, Madam Speaker, and all my colleagues who are here today. Congratulations as well on all of your bills and legislation. And just to reiterate one point, so the respite center beds that Majority Leader Powers was talking about, across the entire city, we only have 50 beds. If I'm not mistaken, 50 beds currently. So if you think about how many people are in mental health crisis across the city and the fact that we only have 50 of these respite center beds, that's why we're so proud to push this legislation forward, as well as the clubhouse models, because I don't think in the past we really have valued the peer-led and peer-centered forms of care in addition to what we're seeing in the outpatient clinics as well as inpatient clinics. And so all these pieces of legislation combined, we're really proud to pass these pieces of legislation through to address this mental health crisis. And so I'm very proud today also to be introducing two of my own pieces of legislation. Intro 1018 will require the Mayor's Office of Community Mental Health to provide an annual report to the City Council with information regarding the Mayor's involuntary transport directive. And the reason why I love this bill is because I'm a huge fan of data. I think data really informs and tells a story about where we need to pivot, where we need to put more resources, where we're not doing well, where we need to improve. And so this is why we are asking for this data, so that we can have more information to give us the tools we need to make adjustments that are necessary. So this bill will help us to do that, and it recognizes the crucial oversight to deliver community-based services to individuals in need of mental health treatment. And the second bill, Intro 1019A, will require OCMH to create and maintain an interactive map of the locations, contact information, and payment information of mental health service providers included in New York City's mental health database. And I know there's currently a form of a database right now, but I have to say, as someone who used to run social services and mental health services, it is very confusing trying to find all the resources. And if I, as someone suffering from mental health, can't find the resources, it makes it that much harder for someone to receive and get care. So this is an important legislation that we're passing today. And just to reemphasize, we are a resource-rich city, but New Yorkers can be understandably confused when navigating so many different government programs and entities. And the mental health roadmap remains a holistic, multi-pronged approach that focuses on adequate investments into more effective, preventive, and responsive evidence-based models that ensure that people are plugged into resources and served as New York City improves the continuum of care and combats the mental health crisis. And this is especially important after years and years of disinvestment into the mental health system. So it's high time we put more resources into it. And I just want to thank the Speaker, our colleagues here for just your true investment in pouring into this mental health roadmap. And just want to thank all the Council committee staff as well, and the dedicated efforts of this committee and Speaker Adams. So thank you all so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Councilmember Lee. And lastly, we will vote on the veto override for our City FEPS voucher legislation. First, we have Introduction 878A, sponsored by Deputy Speaker Diana Ayala, which removes barriers to rental assistance, reduces length of stays in the shelter system, and prevents more New Yorkers from entering shelters by removing shelter stay as a precondition to receiving City FEPS vouchers. The Deputy Speaker is not available to join us here today, but we really thank her for all of her passionate work and advocacy on this entire issue. Next, Introduction 229A, sponsored by Councilmember Tiffany Caban, allows for full utilization of the full cost of City FEPS vouchers by prohibiting the Department of Social Services from deducting a utility allowance from the maximum amount of a voucher except in limited circumstances. I invite Councilmember Caban to come forward and speak about her legislation.
Good afternoon. Congratulations to my colleagues and their staff members who are passing legislation today. And I want to begin by saying how proud I am to stand with my colleagues, Deputy Speaker Ayala, Chair Sanchez, and of course, Speaker Adams. Madam Speaker, your rock-solid, unwavering leadership on this issue will be felt by many struggling families throughout the 5 boroughs. Today's show of strength could not have happened without your backbone, your commitment, and your refusal to be bullied. And let's be clear, what we are pushing through today is a common sense, cost-efficient legislative package that will move struggling New Yorkers from the shelter system into permanent housing much more efficiently, period. And any claims that it is fiscally imprudent or logistically impractical are at best flagrant errors and at worst outright lies. Then again, I will say that the mayor's veto comes as no surprise, given the rest of his disastrous approach to housing. Imposing annual rent hikes via his handpicked board, starving the Department of Housing Preservation and Development of staff through repeated budget cuts, including $43 million in FY24's adopted budget when compared to last year's modified budget, forcing New Yorkers facing eviction to represent themselves in court by allocating less than 5% of what right-to-counsel providers say they desperately need, and forcibly removing thousands of our homeless neighbors only to place a grand total of 3 in permanent housing. Not 3,000, not 300, not 3 dozen, just 3. And the mayor's so-called city of yes appears to be a big yes to big real estate and a big fat no to working class and low-income New Yorkers. And so I'm pretty proud to stand here today and say, Mr. Mayor, not this time. Today, the members of the People's Elected Council are going to put our foot down. So I'm excited to be banding together with my colleagues here to continue, again, as we said last time, to legislate as though housing is a human right and nothing less than that. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Finally, Introduction 893A removes certain Department of Social Services criteria that determine eligibility for city FEPs and gives New Yorkers the ability to demonstrate risk of eviction by presenting a rent demand letter. Introduction 894A changes the eligibility for city FEPs voucher from 200% of the federal poverty level to 50% of the area median income and eases work and source of income requirements that make it difficult for New Yorkers to pursue employment and housing at the same time. Both are sponsored by Councilmember Pierina Sanchez, and I invite her to come up and speak about why her legislation is needed.
Good afternoon. My name is Pierina Sanchez, and I am the chair of the New York City Council's Committee on Housing and Buildings, the sponsor for Intro 893 and 894. But truly, the reason that I am so proud to stand here today is because I am the representative for District 14 in the New York City Council. District 14 is home to a community of 170,000 people, 98% of which are people of color, the median worker of which earns just $23,000 per year. And so one thing that I believe can be lost in these discussions of policy and what is the best approach and what should we do as a city moving forward is that human story, is Maria, I'm giving her a different name, who is a mother of 4 and works while her children are in school and also works while she has childcare, but still does not earn enough to not fall behind on her rent. Structural issues that make it so that my community is unstably housed. Isabel, who is a senior newly on fixed income, who earns $800 per month from her Social Security benefits, but has a rent of $1,200, structurally keeping her behind. $1,200 to cover 70% of that cost with a voucher is much, much, much less expensive than having her go through the shelter system, through eviction through the shelter system, and then, of course, finding a new, more expensive apartment. And most importantly, are the kids at IS 206. I always talk about the children at IS 206, one of the schools in our city which has the highest percentage of students who live in temporary housing. These are vibrant, happy, exuberant children who have to trek sometimes from Queens because they were displaced from their home in District 14. This is real life. we are legislating and we are today taking action to override because we truly believe that these pieces of legislation together are going to make a difference for New Yorkers that need our help. I want to thank our speaker for your steadfast leadership. I am so proud to be on this city council with you as our leader, standing on behalf of the New Yorkers that need our voice the most. Thank you. Deputy Speaker Ayala, who of course leads from the lived experience, having lived in shelter herself, truly understands why these pieces of legislation are so important. And to all of our colleagues who are going to be standing today again and making that strong statement, thank you. And we wouldn't be here without the steadfast advocacy of those organizations across the city of New York who have the connection to those with lived experience, like Homeless Services United, WIN, Make the Road, Legal Aid Society, Vocal, New Destiny Housing, New York Immigration Coalition. The list goes on. Nobody does anything on our own, and this bill package is an example. This legislation is long overdue, and after nearly a year of inaction by the administration, despite our repeated calls, we are making a difference for New Yorkers. This legislation represents comprehensive solutions to help people stay within their homes while providing those in shelters a stronger, faster pathway to secure permanent housing. The speaker mentioned that last month, New York City reported 100,000 people were housed in our shelters, a record number. And it's important to note that 50,000 of these individuals are long-term New Yorkers who are unhoused, who have been waiting. Right now, and this is, y'all know me, you know I get emotional with these topics, but right now our city is facing a homelessness crisis that is compounded by an eviction crisis. And that number of families that is facing eviction in the city of New York, the speaker has said, is 178,000 people. 178,000. That is my community. And so, of course, we stand here today, we stand here steadfast, facing this situation, and I am so proud, so excited that a veto-proof majority passed the bill initially, and that we are going to take action collectively again today to stand by the New Yorkers who need us. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Council Member. That concludes our stated agenda, and with that, we will take on topic questions first.
Madam Speaker, I'm just wondering, you said that you look forward after this override to going back to collegial and collaborative efforts with the mayor. If he responds to this override by suing the city council, how do you go about doing that?
You know, we're going to take, as we have, we're going to take every day as it comes. And we'll deal with that, you know, when and if we have to. What we really, really would prefer to do would be to work collaboratively for the lowest income New Yorkers that need this legislation so desperately. And I think that's going to be our focus. As they say, we'll cross that bridge when and if we come to it, and we'll work through it.
The administration, the mayor himself has kind of hinted at this legal action, but they haven't really explicitly said exactly what they intend to do. Has anybody from the administration conveyed anything to you as to what they plan to do, what they have in mind? They've suggested the state has some sort of jurisdiction over this where the council does not. Like, can you tell us a bit about anything you've talked to with that bill?
I wish I could elaborate on that for you, Andrew, but I have been given no signal of that. I have been given no word of that. I've had no conversation, candidly, of that. So that's something that I can't even address. Sorry.
Speaker,
How you
the
think?
argument that Michael just mentioned that the administration is making, I mean, have you heard about the ideas of that, like that the state has jurisdiction over rental programs like this? And, you know, what do you think of that argument?
Well, you know, again, it's a conversation that's yet to be had with us. I think it's a little, you know, presumptuous for me to answer when there's been no conversation, you know, around that situation with me personally or my staff around that situation. So we're going to be prepared, however this plays out, obviously, you know, but again, for the low-income New Yorkers, that's the concern of these bills, and it's very, very critical that the implementation is successful.
Yesterday. He was the speaker for us, probably almost 16 years.
That's right.
And he told
Yeah, the mayor and I have communicated, of course, since the passage of the budget. As far as regularity of speaking, we speak and we text, just to let you know that. So we are definitely communicating with each other. There is no pattern of our speaking. We've known each other for a very long time, and we continue to have a dialogue with each other.
Would you say it's several times a week you hear from him?
Several times a week? No. I would not say several times a week. That would take away a lot of work.
The Citizens Budget Commission today was released a report saying that this would cost a significant amount to taxpayers. Have you guys been talking to groups like Citizen Budget Commission? What is kind of the differentiation there? I know you guys were saying this would actually save taxpayer money. The mayor's office is saying, of course, this would cost. So I guess just what kind of model is the differentiation there?
Yeah, well, we know, again, what we've said, it's far more cost effective to have someone in permanent housing than to continue in this expensive way that we're going, in ongoing emergency shelter, in keeping people in hotel shelters. Exorbitant fees, is putting it mildly. So it costs the city, as we said, more to house a family of two in the shelter system on a monthly basis than a city FEPS voucher for that same family. And too often in government, we don't account comprehensively for the costs associated with negative outcomes, and homelessness is really no exception to that. I already mentioned in my remarks the public policy organizations that did put out the information for all to see, WIN and Community Service Society of New York, who released their own fiscal analyses that found significant savings for the city, which we happen to agree with. $730 million, according to WIN. That's substantial. The underlying truth, though, is that homelessness comes at a high cost to New Yorkers, period. It really does. In our city, we have to stop the rise in evictions and homelessness. It's only going to go up. It's just going to keep increasing. Thank you.
Madam Speaker,
Hi, Jeff.
the federal program appears to be funded less in this year's budget than previously, and I'm wondering how this new legislation may actually affect that. And then secondly, I'm wondering if you think there will actually be enough existing housing for people, even with increased vouchers. And is there any plan? How do you deal with that?
Yeah, thank you, Jeff, for the question. Funding is an issue in everything we do. We just passed the budget, and as you and everyone else saw, this was a restorative budget, unfortunately. We had to fill in a lot of gaps, quite frankly, that would be vacant today as we sit here had the council not done the council's due diligence in ensuring that those gaps were filled for New Yorkers, particularly New Yorkers that need essential services. So we are looking toward, working around those issues. When it comes to city FEPS, your second question was, I'm sorry.
Is there enough housing for the vouchers? And then maybe you can tell how would you work on that? What's the purpose?
Yeah, thank you. The building of housing is definitely, it has to be a priority for the city. It has to be a priority for the city. It is a key solution, but the crisis still does require a lot of solutions. I agree. We have to address exclusionary zoning as well to approve more housing, and that's been a focus of mine personally. I introduced a fair housing legislation that sets targets for equitable housing production in each and every community, because each and every community should be responsible for housing and the production of housing. We are working with the administration on all of these efforts, and we've got to continue to work together because we all agree that housing is an issue, and we've got to build it. We've got to build it much better than we have in the past, obviously. But we do have ways to do that, and we have to continue to talk about it. Oh, yes. Pierina would like to add to that.
Yeah,
Please.
Thank you, Jeffrey. I just want to add one of these pieces of legislation, Intro 893, is all about keeping folks in their homes. So you have a home already. That apartment was not available to anyone because you are in it, and now you become eligible for a voucher and that helps you stay in there. That's a part of the cost driver, and that's not competing with anything, right? And then the second point, I think the speaker said it beautifully, but this council has, as a body, we've held hearings in support of basement apartments, of accessory dwelling units, of office conversions for more housing in the city of New York. We passed a budget just now that makes available $4 billion for the preservation and production of affordable housing, and specifically deeply affordable and supportive housing across the city of New York. And we also have measures that are trying to move folks into NYCHA and take advantage of vacant units more readily. We are partners. We are willing and able and ready to partner. Just because I said earlier today, we can walk and chew gum. We can do all of these measures. Just because you need to make some improvements somewhere else doesn't mean you don't take action today. So, thank you.
You know, and two, I just want to add to that, you know, the council member said that beautifully. We have housing available. We're not talking about that. 6,400 units of available NYCHA units. That's there. Why aren't we talking about that? There's supportive housing that's available. We're not really talking about that. So I think that those are the conversations that we need to bring more to the forefront, to talk about what is available more so than what we don't have. We can build more around.
To follow up on Jeff's question, Madam Speaker, can you sort of square the council taking the action to expand eligibility for city vets when the spending for city vets next year will be $140 million less than this year?
Yeah. The point still is that we have to move people out of shelter. What this package of legislation is going to do is exactly that. It's going to move people out of shelter, giving people places to live. We continue to talk about costs. I think that the point still is there are answers. There are alternatives to shelter that we aren't really focusing on. If we collaboratively deal with this, and that is my hope, once again, after today, that we will do more collaboration and discussion. The council has so much to offer as far as solutions and ways to get there, and I think that that is what we need to do.
If I could follow, because you just mentioned there keeping, having a collaborative relationship with the administration.
Mm-hmm.
This is a mayor who publicly bristles at criticisms. He was asked about rent hikes and responded in a rather extraordinary way. He's accused other people of, asking him questions he deems unfair and not showing him the proper respect. Does that carry over in your relationship with him?
That's a good question. The mayor's relationship with the media and the press is not the same relationship that the mayor has with the speaker. So that I can attest to. So no, it really doesn't carry into the conversations on the way that we interact with each other. Hi.
Are you concerned about the administration not implementing the changes the way the council intended, and what would you do in that situation?
Yeah. Again, that's another great question. We will deal with that when and if we have to. I don't want to surmise anything yet because we really do just want to do this vote. We want to see, we would prefer to see, I will say, this bring us more together as far as solutions, working in partnership than anything else. So I can't really surmise as to the what if on that, but our hope is that this, number one, is going to do more to move New Yorkers into permanent housing situations, and to build a more cohesive conversation around it. You mentioned the hiring halls. They've been very effective. I think that we need to do more of them, and I think that we really need to ramp up those numbers as far as those hiring halls are considered. We've seen really, really tremendous participation among New Yorkers. Now, what I will say is that the applicants that are coming in and that really do pass muster to get the city agencies, if there is a bottleneck there, we need to release that bottleneck that may be preventing folks from actually becoming hired and moving into those positions that are offered. There are so many positions, so much of an opportunity for folks to have gainful employment, benefits, the whole nine. And I don't know, in my, life as a New Yorker all these millions of years now, what I find most frustrating with our city, and the council is helping with this, and that is to relieve the red tape and the bureaucracy that sometimes is there unnecessarily.
More vouchers become available specifically for people who are leaving the shelter system, not people who are already in existing housing. What do you say to the landlords who are discriminate, even though it is already illegal, discriminate against people who use vouchers or refuse to take them? If there are going to be more vouchers available, that's a problem that are constantly running into.
Yeah, thank you, Sylvia. That's been an issue for such a long time, discrimination when it comes to those that do have the vouchers. And it's been something that we've been grappling with, again, for a really, really long time. I think it's going to be really incumbent upon this council, once again, to continue to do our job, to continue to conduct our oversight hearings with regard to that type of discriminatory behavior. We may even take a look at greater levels of legislation to, to halt that type of behavior. What I will say, though, is that, to all of our landlords that do have, and I will call it an opportunity, that do have the opportunity to house anyone that is coming to them or may come to them with a City FEPS voucher, do what is right for your fellow New Yorker. Accept that voucher and give them a helping hand and absolutely a step up into the greater things of life that they deserve, just like everyone else deserves. Thank you. Thanks, everybody. Thank you, colleagues.